What if I told you the Ten Commandments appear 3 times in the Bible and that they don't match? Picture the classic stone tablets. Now picture 6 of them, 3 different pairs, 3 different versions. Most people assume there's one definitive list carved in stone for all eternity. The Bible tells a different story. One version even gets explicitly rejected by later biblical authors. And this isn't a skeptical attack on scripture. It's what the text actually says. And here's another surprise. Even the name is wrong. The Hebrew doesn't say 10 commandments. It says 10 statements, 10 utterances, the Decalogue. Let's start with the version everyone knows, Exodus chapter 20. The structure divides into 2 categories. First, duties to God. Worship only Yahweh, make no images, don't swear false oaths, keep the Sabbath, honor your parents. Second, duties to community. No murder, no adultery, no theft, no false testimony, no coveting. Simple, right? Except there's a problem. Count the actual statements in the text. You get about 13, not 10. Someone had to force them into 10. That's why Jews, Catholics, and Protestants number them differently. And they made different choices about what counts as 1 commandment versus 2. Now, the first surprise, Deuteronomy chapter 5. Moses retells the Decalogue to the next generation, word for word, you'd expect. It's not. Look at the Sabbath commandments side by side. Exodus says, keep the Sabbath because God rested on the 7th day after creating the world. A cosmological reason. Deuteronomy says, keep the Sabbath because you were slaves in Egypt and God freed you. An ethical, historical reason. Completely different theological emphasis. Same commandment, different rationale. The text also shifts from forbidding false oaths to forbidding vain oaths. Different Hebrew words, different meanings. These aren't copying errors. These are deliberate theological choices. But that's not even the biggest surprise, Exodus 34. Here's the narrative setup. Moses comes down from Sinai with the original tablets. He sees the golden calf. He smashes the tablets in anger. Then God tells Moses to carve new tablets, and God will write on them, quote, the same words that were on the first tablets, the same words. What follows shares only 2 items with Exodus 20. 2. Instead of no murder and no adultery, we get don't intermarry with Canaanites. Observe the festival of unleavened bread. Dedicate your firstborn to God. Bring first fruits offerings. Don't boil a kid in its mother's milk. Completely different category of commands, ritual laws, not ethical principles. Here's the kicker. Exodus 34 verse 28 is the only place in the entire Bible where a list gets explicitly called the 10 Commandments. The Hebrew phrase aseret ha-devarim, the 10 words, appears here and only here, referring to a specific list. The text claims these ritual laws are the 10 Commandments, the version everyone memorizes from Exodus 20. Never called that in the Bible. We elevated one version and ignored what the text actually names. That's an interpretive choice, not a biblical mandate. What does this tell us about how ancient Israel treated sacred texts? Biblical scholar Mark Brettler puts it directly. Ancient Israel didn't value verbatim preservation the way we assume. Even texts presented as God's unmediated speech, words carved by the divine finger, got modified. Different communities preserved different traditions. Later editors collected them into one scroll without harmonizing the contradictions. The golden calf narrative may be a brilliant editorial strategy. By having Moses smash the first tablets, the editors created narrative space to incorporate a competing tradition. Both versions become canonical. The contradiction becomes part of the story. This wasn't sloppiness. It was a fundamentally different relationship to sacred text. The Bible doesn't just preserve multiple versions, it actively argues with the Decalogue. Exodus 20 verses 5 and 6 states a principle. God visits the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the 3rd and 4th generation. Intergenerational punishment. Your grandfather sins, you suffer. Deuteronomy chapter 7 directly contradicts this. God repays those who hate him to their face immediately, personally, not their descendants. Then the prophet Ezekiel goes further. Chapter 18, verse 20, the son shall not bear the iniquity of the father. Ezekiel adamantly rejects what the Decalogue explicitly claims. The Bible argues with itself about whether the Decalogue is even correct. This matters because it reveals how the Decalogue's authority developed over time. During the biblical period itself, the text was fluid. Multiple versions circulated. Authors felt free to modify, reinterpret, even contradict. The Decalogue wasn't treated as untouchable. Later religious traditions made a choice. They elevated Exodus 20 as the definitive version. They claimed it was fixed, immutable, absolute, divine law. That claim doesn't come from the Bible. It comes from later interpretation. The stone tablets weren't as set in stone as we thought. Understanding this history changes how we read. So where does this leave us practically? First, when someone references the 10 Commandments, ask which 10. The ethical version from Exodus 20, the slightly different version from Deuteronomy 5, the ritual version from Exodus 34 that the Bible actually calls the 10 Commandments. The question isn't hostile, it's honest. Second, understanding textual fluidity helps us read ancient texts more accurately. We stop projecting modern assumptions about exact copying onto cultures that valued interpretive transmission. We take the text seriously on its own terms, not ours. Third, this isn't an attack on faith. Recognizing multiple versions doesn't diminish the Decalogue's significance. It reveals something important about how ancient Israel actually engaged with sacred tradition. They didn't treat divine speech as frozen text to preserve unchanged. They treated it as living tradition to interpret, adapt, and apply to new circumstances. The fluidity isn't a problem to explain away. It's a feature of how these texts functioned in their original context. Later traditions chose to freeze one version. Right? That choice has consequences we should understand. The Decalogue remains one of the most influential texts in human history. Its principles shaped legal systems, ethical thinking, and religious practice across millennia. None of that changes. What changes is our understanding of its origins. 3 versions, not one. Internal contradictions, not perfect consistency. Later, elevation, not original absolute authority. The Bible itself treats the Decalogue as a living tradition, subject to interpretation and even disagreement. Taking the Bible seriously means taking this evidence seriously. The stone tablets weren't as immutable as tradition claims, and recognizing that opens up richer, more honest engagement with these ancient texts.